Okay, we're going to call the work session of July the 11th, 2017 to order, and we're going to start out with some citizen comments, and I'm going to ask the Vice Mayor to orchestrate that. We have some special guests tonight. And
all righty. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm very pleased to report that the sister cities of Franklin and Williamson County, we host student exchange every year, and we're very fortunate tonight to have a group of students who this year, 2017, visit Germany, Bad Soden, Germany, and a lot of you all know Bad Soden because they were here a few weeks back. Also, we have students who visit Carleton Place, Canada, two of our sister cities. At this time, I'm going to have Betsy Taylor, teacher at Franklin High School, and also the chaperone for the German students, and let her take a few minutes to share their experience.
Thank you, Pearl. It is a pleasure to be here to speak with you. It was a wonderful opportunity to travel with these students and to have this experience. I've been a world language teacher for about 20 years, and I cannot tell you how important I think it is to have these types of interactions and exchanges, these opportunities to meet and interact and see the world. And then, of course, today in the world we live in, there are many serious problems, and I truly believe that these types of one-on-one interactions are the way to solving some of these big problems that face us, and we had a wonderful time. I would also like to say that I was thoroughly impressed with the way our young people interacted and conducted themselves, took advantage of every opportunity. They were truly ambassadors, not just for Franklin and Tennessee, but for the United States, and I was very, very proud to accompany them and to be with them for this opportunity. I'm going to introduce a few of them, and then a couple were going to share their own experience, because what better way than out of their own mouths with their experience of their exchange. We have Paige Hurley and Sidonia Cannon, Rhiannon Speckman, who went to Bad Soden with myself at the beginning of June, and Caitlin Smith at the end of May, beginning of June, and a couple other students went to Carleton Place, so they're here. And if you have any questions or anything, I'm sure they'd love to speak with you about it. And then we also have a student who participated last year, Claire. You're at Franklin. Yes, I recognize you. At Franklin, and her German student has come back because once you build these bridges, people just keep coming across, and you can't burn those bridges. They're too vital to our success. So I'm going to turn it over to Sedona and Rhiannon, and they're going to share a little bit with you. I think we have some pictures as well.
It's
so,
not
ladies,
we do not have pictures.
Let's see, ladies, the German photos are not coming up, so I'm not sure what's happening there. What about Canada?
The Canada pictures I can get.
We have the Canadian pictures. Let's go ahead and bring those up. Thank you. Go right ahead, ladies.
All right, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, like Ms. Taylor said, I'm Sidonia Cannon, and this is Rhiannon Speckman. We both, and all of us here would first like to thank you so much for supporting this organization. Last month, we all had an incredible opportunity to travel to Bad Soden, Germany for our sister cities student exchange. We could talk for hours about our experience, but we condensed it for time's sake. We were immediately welcomed by our host families, and it soon felt like a second home. Being a part of a great family definitely made this trip memorable. We gained a greater understanding of the German culture, much more than we would have traveling as a regular tourist.
And we absolutely loved actually the history of Frankfurt and Bad Soden. And one of my favorite history stories that we learned was with the assistant mayor taking us around and touring us around Bad Soden about how it once was this swampy plot of farmland and how they built a city on top of it.
I love seeing the signatures of Martin Luther and Erlich Zwingli in an old church, and it was really interesting and incredible to see something that I learned about in school actually right in front of my face.
Another cultural thing that we experienced was the language barrier, but even though we didn't necessarily speak the language that they speak as well, as teenagers we connected with different facial expressions and just different phrases that they said in a sort of way that we still understood and were able to contribute to the conversation even though we didn't speak the same language. And we also thought this was like such a better way to learn a language, being integrated into it. For example, I'm pretty sure all of us picked up the word essen very easily. It was means like food, dinner, or eating. And whenever we heard that word, we always knew that, oh, so we're going to be getting food at some point, right? So slowly we picked up different phrases, and it's kind of hard to describe other than you're like a baby again. And you're sitting there and you're listening to people, and you see how they converse with each other through their language, and you slowly pick it up yourself.
It was also, I loved ordering something in German, like just a little bit of the German. I knew I could order something, and I got it right, and then the cashier, they'd understand me, and I'd be rewarded with ice cream.
Sidonia mostly did that. I wasn't quite there. But in another culture means we learned what it was like to have to bike everywhere. Here we mostly drive everywhere, but they don't get their license until 18. And we realized that they don't really need it until 18 because everything is so close to each other that they just bike.
Okay, we are all so thankful to have been presented with this life-changing opportunity to travel to Bad Soden. We experienced the cultures outside of Franklin and the U.S. and gained a deeper appreciation for them. We think it's awesome that Bad Soden and Franklin are now officially sister cities. The local government officials were very complimentary of the hospitality and extend their warm greetings to you all. We know that this relationship will continue to grow, and more students like us will also be able to have the same wonderful experience. We deeply appreciate the efforts put forth by both governments and the Sister Cities organization, which made this exchange possible. Thank you all again.
Thank you.
Welcome back, and we're glad you had a great experience, but sorry about the technical glitch there. So we'll have to see that another time.
We're going to go into our meeting, so if you all want to exit, you may do that. Otherwise, you're welcome to sit.
It'll be a great meeting. Eric, I think you had a comment to make.
I
or
wanted to make
recognition?
just a quick recognition myself. Even though I was off last week, we've still been a little busy, and I wanted to recognize a couple people. We've appointed 2 new directors on our senior leadership team here at the city, and so I wanted to just recognize them. But Jordan must be working on an IT issue somewhere, I'm sure. But want to recognize Michelle Hatcher and Jordan Shaw. Michelle has been promoted to be our water management director. She's served in the assistant director position for the last 3.5 years. So we're proud to have her step up to that role. Prior to joining the city 3.5 years ago, she worked in the consulting side of the world, working in Nashville, Los Angeles, and Montana, working on various environmental and water and other engineering related issues. She has an environmental engineering degree from the University of Central Florida and is a registered professional engineer. So she, of course, has stepped into that role, very familiar with our team, part of our team, and stepping up into more of a leadership role as we've promoted Mark a few months ago into the assistant city administrator position. So I want to recognize Michelle. She'll be talking to you in a little bit on some other items we're working on. And then also Dr. Jordan Shaw. Jordan has been with the city in a couple different roles, in a couple different stints since 2008, and most recently served as our assistant IT director. Our IT director, Fred Banner, will be retiring in January officially from the city, but we wanted to have a transition time and also allow Fred to focus on some specific projects. And so we went ahead and made the selection and have Jordan in place as our IT director effective 1st of July. So Jordan comes to us with a lot of experience, a doctorate in business administration and computer information systems. He is a U.S. Army veteran and has served in a number of different roles in IT with the Army, on the private sector, and also a number of roles here at the city. So we're proud to have both of these folks internally step up to new leadership roles, and just wanted to recognize that because that news all kind of broke between our last meetings. So just wanted to recognize those folks.
Okay, we're ready to get started. Items 1 and 2 are liquor license renewals. Are any questions about those? If not, we'll move on to item 3, which is an update on the downtown parking capacity study. And
We have our team from Volkert and also our engineering
Brad
folks coming up.
Thompson.
Yep, Brad's coming.
Bring your team on up.
And we're going to talk about, sort of update where we are with looking at some of the capacity issues and bring you up to date from the last update we gave you a couple months ago. So Paul and Brad are bringing something up for you.
Yeah, we're trying to bring up a presentation, which I just printed it off of the website, so it should be on there.
Brad, go ahead and tell the TV audience who you are.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, I'm Brad Thompson with Volkert. Here with me tonight is Teresa Neal, who is also with Volkert. We've been working on the parking study for a little while now, and I know you all are aware of that because I think we spoke with pretty much all of you at one point or another about this. So here tonight to give you a little update on where things are at, and we're getting closer and closer to the finish line, and kind of wanted to bring you all up to speed. Last time we were here, we talked about the existing conditions. Tonight, I'm going to give you a briefing on the future conditions and the projected parking demand that we're seeing. So as soon as we get that pulled up, we'll get ready to go.
Have you
The second one, I
have
think.
you obtained more information since the last time that you were here for this? Or-
Yeah, we've now, we moved into the future conditions, so we've gone through projections
Okay.
for projecting out in the future the actual parking demand for the city.
I think we're ready to go.
Are we ready? Okay. Paul, do you want to say anything?
No, I think you covered it.
You good? Okay. All right, okay. Well, thank you very much. Again, just here to give you an update. I know you all have got a long meeting tonight, and so I'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. Just real quickly, the things we're going to cover here, agenda-wise, the project overview and the status report. We're going to talk about future land use, the future parking scenario, and then also just real quick, some questions and next steps. The purpose of the parking study we've talked about before. At this point, we're here to talk about the projections for the anticipated parking demand in the downtown area. That's where we are in the process, and then next we'll be coming back to you with the identification of the parking infrastructure, operational needs, recommendations of what we're coming back with next. So right now, we are, as you can see here on the schedule, we're right here giving the BOMA update for June, July of this year from the future conditions analysis. We'll be moving forward in September with a BOMA review of the recommendations. And then finally, we'll be wrapping up the study. One thing we've done since we were here last is we did have a public meeting. And I believe there's some information that was included with your packet regarding the public meeting, basically a summary of the meeting. We went through that process, got a lot of great feedback with regard to parking in and around downtown. A lot of what we heard was, we heard some people that are interested in, seeing parking that's maybe in some instances maybe a little more convenient to where they want to be. We heard things about people's varying opinions on how long you should be able to park on Main Street. Those types of things. You can imagine when you're talking about parking the types of things you hear, but there is a summary there if you're interested in a little more information there. So now let me move into kind of the real reason for this update, and that's regarding the parking needs projections. Here what you see is basically a brief summary of our existing parking supply and demand. This slide shows that there's basically a surplus of parking on a typical weekday. Now, I don't want to get too hung up on that fact, but the reality is, while we do show a surplus, that surplus is not necessarily in relation to where people want to be. So in other words, there's parking out there, it just may not necessarily be in the right locations, and that's generally what we're seeing here with the city of Franklin. So I don't want you to go with that and think, oh, well, we've got plenty of parking, we don't need to worry about it. That's not necessarily the case, because it's as much about numbers, it's as much about convenience and those types of things as it is about the actual numbers. This is kind of the snapshot, the existing conditions, the existing plus committed, which is basically the amount of parking that you would have after you add in the projects that are in the development pipeline Example of that is Harpeth Square, 231, and Renaissance Bank. So that's kind of the existing condition snapshot. We gave you a whole lot of data last time we were here, but now let's move over and look at the shared parking analysis, which is the methodology we used for developing the future conditions and determining the type of demand we're going to have. So you can see here we used basically an industry standard shared parking analysis from the Urban Land Institute. Shared parking analysis takes into account that peak hours and demands for parking vary according to the land uses. It takes into account land uses with varying demands that are located within close proximity can actually share parking areas. Should be noted that reductions were taken for the time of day and the month. However, we did not take any reductions for the different modes of travel. So really, this is about the most conservative way we could look at parking in terms of numbers. And what I mean by that is we did not show any reductions for people who may park in one place and walk to multiple other places. So we wanted to take a conservative approach to the parking aspect of things. So in order to project the future parking needs using the shared parking method, we had to develop a future development scenario. The future development scenario, basically, let me first of all say that this was not a market demand study, okay? I mean, this is planning projections. There are assumptions built into this, obviously, as it relates to future growth and development in the downtown core. But really, we used the existing parcel sizes. We used the existing building square footages. We used the existing land uses. We used the future land use from the Envision plan. And out of all that, developed a projection for building square footages. So moving over here to the next slide, something I want to point out with regard to this future land use scenario is we did make a real attempt to take a realistic look at the downtown core of the study area for this. That's why we worked very closely with your city planning staff to go through this process. We kind of took an initial shot at projecting out future building square footages. We worked with the planning staff on a block-by-block basis, worked through each and every one of those to have them review it, kind of give a reality check, if you will. They're obviously far more in tune than any of us with regards to trends and things with downtown areas. So they reviewed it and were in agreement with kind of what we came up with based on that. Once we were able to do that, we utilized that projected building square footage to produce the shared parking scenario. A couple things I want to point out. The shared parking analysis, shared use parking analysis was conducted on shared parking districts, okay? Shared parking districts are basically nothing more than geographic analysis zones. We basically had to break the downtown into some geographic areas to be able to analyze it, like I said, on that kind of that block-by-block basis. A couple important things to point out with regard to shared uses. The shared uses that are included in the future parking analysis are retail, institutional, office, restaurant, and banking or finance. There are also discrete uses which are not included in the future parking analysis, and that includes residential and hotel. Obviously, with those uses, we're assuming they're going to provide their own parking. Residential, single-family houses, they're going to have a driveway, they're going to have a parking area, no matter where they're located. All that being said, looking at the building square footages, you can see a map here in front of you. Basically, we broke this up into those parking districts the shared parking districts we were talking about. Those parking districts are based on basically current land use distribution and parking locations. It doesn't necessarily mean that somebody can't park in one little shared district we put together and walk to another one. That's not necessarily what that means. But what you see here is the existing and future square footage for each district on total for the shared parking uses. And again, I want to point out this is not a market study. Again, these are based on the assumptions that we made along with your city planning staff based on development. But you can see here across the board, you generally see an increase in office and/or retail throughout the downtown area in terms of building square footages.
Brad, why do you call it shared parking?
Why do we call it shared parking?
Yeah.
That's the analysis. Is shared. Basically, there are multiple uses. So retail, office, all those, they don't necessarily have their own in a downtown area, they don't have their own dedicated parking necessarily.
But that's all we have in Franklin, isn't it?
Well, no, like, for example, the parking for the shopping mall, Cool Springs Mall, I mean, it has its own dedicated parking.
Downtown Franklin.
And downtown, that's what we have is shared parking. And that's why we're using the shared parking analysis, yes. Yep, that's correct. Yeah.
And
So-
sometimes things, like this, the garage here, once the people are gone for the day, then there's space for people to come in and park.
The church uses
That-
the church.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the point, and the weekends too, yes, thank you.
Yeah,
Good
absolutely.
example.
So that's why we use the shared parking analysis. It's just a method that's, universally accepted as far as how to handle downtown parking areas, yeah.
If you look at it individually, they would have to count spaces to accommodate the church, which is not really needed because they're using it during those off peaks. They're shared.
Off-peak, yeah,
Yep.
off-peak.
Yeah. So basically, at the end of the day, once we've figured out the building square footages, we're able to produce the future shared parking demand for each parking district. So this is the map you see here in front of you. Of particular interest, you're probably going to notice the central and east areas. This is the total shared parking demand. So this is the total number of spaces in the future. You're looking at 1,500 and 1,600 spaces for the central and the east. Now, that's a big number, obviously, but keep in mind, this is not all parking that the city of Franklin has to provide. I mean, this is public and private parking. So it's not like we've got to go out and build a whole bunch of garages to accommodate future public parking. So we have the future total demand. Now we need to go back and take a look at the existing parking supply. So you can see that's what we have here. This is existing parking supply broken down again by those shared parking districts. And then going back to what I mentioned earlier, the existing plus the committed parking supply. You can see where we are in terms of each of those districts. And again, the committed includes, Harvard Square, 231, 249, and Renaissance Bank were the ones that were in the pipeline at the time we were doing this. So at the end of the day, we're able to compare all those numbers and get to this graphic here, which shows the map of parking districts and basically identifies the parking needs. So we're looking at the existing plus the committed parking compared to what the future demand is going to be, and it gives us a pretty good range of where we feel like we need to be in terms of number of parking spaces in the future for the downtown Franklin area. Now, keep in mind, I want to point out again, we obviously had to develop these building square footages based on assumptions and working with the city planning staff, but literally, something could happen with the economy tomorrow that would completely change this. I mean, so that's why this is something that the planning staff and engineering staff will be able to use going forward as new developments come in. They can look at this and figure out how that impacts their parking. Because, I mean, it could be, if the economy changed for the worse tomorrow, I mean, this could all be impacted by that, obviously. So that's something to keep in mind as we move forward here. And I got one more thing here I want to show you. So where we're headed next is with recommendations for parking in downtown, and one of the things I think that will kind of help you as we move forward with that and bring those recommendations to you is kind of understanding how parking works in the downtown area. And I think you all understand this, but really this map here shows the 4th Avenue garage and the 2nd Avenue garage. And you can see if you draw basically a 5-minute walking distance circumference around those, you can see how far those reach. And the point of this is saying that, because we may recommend parking infrastructure in, let's say, the west area here of this shared parking district, that could very well overlap and accommodate parking needs in some of the other shared parking districts as well. So, I mean, obviously there is an area within which people are willing to walk to and from their parking locations. And I believe that is it. I know I went through it quick. I know you all have got a lot to do, so welcome any questions you may have.
Does square footage of parking translate directly into parking spaces? Is there an average area of a parking space, or do you have to calculate aisles to get to them, or?
The shared parking analysis would come comes up with the number of spaces, not the, it doesn't come up with the square footage.
Okay. I
It's
thought
based
that's
on the
what-
building square footage, but it comes up with the number of spaces.
Yeah, so the analysis looked at future building square footage, and depending on the type of facility, if you're doing a surface parking lot, yes, you'd have to take into consideration drive aisles and traffic flow through there. If you're going vertical with a garage, obviously you can, it's
So this
significantly
is
less.
needs for square footages of buildings and,
Based on the building square footage, they're telling us the long-range needs of parking in this area, given the planning projections of densities that could happen in downtown. As they said, a lot of these I guess that's where the decision has to come. We're gonna look at some of the policies, but then also if we should, and we haven't even dove into it yet, should look to build additional public parking, which is kind of the next step, is to bring forward recommendations into why we're ending up with those recommendations.
okay.
So those will be coming in September, Alderman Berger?
Yes, sir.
Is it looking at also something like a bank parking lot that is not used, they're closed during, after 4 or 5 o'clock? And sometimes banks say no parking.
Exactly.
So do we have any of those parking lots that are tied to places that are closed after 5 that are not allowing people to park?
You do have private parking lots, yes, that are marked as no parking, yes.
And what do we do about those? Because how do we go about, like, I don't know, I assume.
Encouraging them to allow people to
I
park.
assume that, like, 5 Points Bank, assume, maybe I'm wrong, that people can park there at night, I don't know. But, are there any places?
Well, for example, the Williams County Archives, you
Yeah.
can't park there during the day, basically, at all. But yeah, there are multiple.
But how about at night?
There, at night, I believe you can, yes, the Williams County Archives, yes.
So
But there-
I
But
guess-
there are, like, some churches, for example, do not have no parking posted all day and all night. Yep.
Right.
Mhm.
If they have a barricade up,
Sure.
I guess you better not go through it.
I can understand the churches and a few things, because sometimes they have activities and they can't afford to have people parking there at night if they have something going on. But I was just thinking about banks and any other kind of industry that closes at 5, that is closing off their parking lots, that we could approach from the city standpoint and have a discussion with them. where we
Yes,
could-
ultimately, we could
Absolutely.
absolutely do that, and right now, we did that with the Fourth Avenue Church, and we're currently leasing that parking lot. We would look to do something similar if that is a desired route to go. with
That'd
some
be
of those.
something
Yeah.
that comes in September. We're just
Right.
showing
Okay.
more data.
I
and-
would just say, as you're doing this and bringing this back to us, that you look at that and have a list of those.
Yeah.
Because I think that we need to know to identify those. And that's why I'm asking the question. So we identify those, so when we are back talking about this subject again, we don't have to say, with the question mark, what are those places?
Okay.
Thanks.
Just 2 really quick things. What about, I think something that we need to look at is the parking that's coming for pay. We have several of those that are in progress right now, in the works, thank you. And the other thing is, I've noticed that, for an example, on Church Street, between 3rd Avenue and 5th Avenue, the people that park there have to park with their right wheels on the sidewalk, or they have to park outside
So,
the marked.
so it's part of their scope, and they've already completed
Yeah.
this part of it. They went through and looked at every single street to determine where parking is feasible and should be allowed long-term and where it shouldn't be. And so those numbers have already been incorporated in here. One of the recommendations is going to be to look at long-term striping and marking and signage for parking in the downtown area. I used to think you could maximize parking by actually having it striped. In some of the areas, we learned that it was actually being overparked, given smaller vehicles are just cramming in or parking adjacent to fire hydrants or too close to intersections. But that's part of their scope that we would ultimately work towards.
Yeah, you may remember last time we talked about existing conditions, some of the locations were over 100% occupied, and that's why. Yeah.
The other thing that I would say that we need information on too is, some of those spots that may belong, they were private parking, but would they be willing to open up their places to parking if they could reap a benefit from that? You know, they may want to put paid parking in there for the evening. Would they do that? Or would they allow the city to partner with them and do that? So that's another question.
Great.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we're ready to move on. Item 4 is this, thank you,
This keeps going
Thank you,
on.
Mayor.
Teresa and Brad. Discussion regarding thermal hydrolysis alternatives analysis.
Mayor and Alderman, we wanted to provide a follow-up update and discussion related to our review of some alternative technology related to pretreatment and thermal hydrolysis alternatives. We talked a couple months ago about where we were and some concerns about our ability to look at a specific alternative. We wanted to provide a little more opportunity for some discussion with regulators, with the city as well, and are really at a point where we want to share with you all the information we have at this point and gauge from you what kind of guidance you have about whether we continue with further analysis, investment in terms of time and effort, in terms of looking at this specific alternative, or if we continue down the path that we had already started with the pre-selection that was completed in 2015 and the design work that has been done to date. We, starting at the end of last year, early part of this year, engaged our design consultant, CDM Smith, in looking at this alternate and how it might impact our existing design and operations. We got to a point where, quite frankly, we had surpassed what I felt was our administrative authority to go beyond that in terms of investing time and specifically consulting resources to do further analysis. So we hit that point. We also did hear some concerns from regulators that raised a concern about the technology's ability to hit a Class A exceptional quality standard for the byproduct. And so we took a further look at that and wanted to provide a little more time for those discussions to take place. But we want to take you through tonight a report that's been provided to you by CDM Smith and walk you through some key components of that and then get some guidance about how you'd like to move forward from there. If you're comfortable providing it tonight, or if you need more information, we're glad to continue to work on that piece. So I'll let Mark and Michelle take it away, and then we're glad to answer any other questions you have.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll go to the next slide.
Oh, here's the.
Oh, okay.
You want me to drive it?
Yeah, you're more than welcome to.
There we go. Okay.
So we're just gonna quickly go over kind of the history and the background of the board decisions that have already been made to date so far. So we'll start out with that, and then we'll go to the analysis that is the report that you all had. And there's, on that slide, there's a matrix, but that matrix is also included in the report, so if you can't see that very well. Some of this, we'll then talk about kind of some of the schedule impacts that continuing the analysis is going to have versus moving forward with the path that we've already selected to move down. There's some cost implications as well for each of the decisions, and then we'll kind of open it up for discussion if y'all have any questions and for a recommendation. So the first one, so kind of some of the background information, and I'm not going into like the really background of the pre-selection of Canby and stuff. So February of 2015, actually, that, as Eric was saying, is the board approved the letter of intent with Canby after kind of we had developed the pre-selection package. We had Canby and Kruger both submit, and then after some careful review, we ended up, CDM ended up recommending Canby, and then it was presented to the board and it was approved. So that was February of 2015. So in October 2016, a special public meeting was called where the Chestnut Bend Homeowners Association had presented an alternative to the thermal hydrolysis process. That was the LISTEC process. And at that time, the board had requested us to move forward with the initial evaluation to determine if it was an apples-to-apples comparison of the two. And then so later that month, then we began to develop kind of a bid package. And then as developing that bid package, realized there was some not apples-to-apples comparisons that needed to be made. So then we kind of moved into the direction of of developing the cost, or not the cost, the non-cost criteria memo that you guys have.
Okay, I'd like to add, so when we started talking through how we were going to analyze the ListTech process and how we would compare Canby to ListTech, there was a number of different approaches we discussed. One of the things that we attempted to do was to maintain the integrity of a bidding process that we had gone through in 2015. There had been some information requests going back and forth, but again, we endeavored to at least stick to the bid process that we were required to follow in this city. So I just wanted to point that out in order to get to this, that apples-to-apples comparison that we were shooting for. So,
okay. So the next slide, and this may be hard to see, so I think you've got a copy of this. That's probably a little bit better. So this was these criteria that are, you can kind of see on the left-hand side, they're the non-cost criteria. Those were the same criteria that were developed in the initial pre-selection package for Canby. So we compared ListTech to those same non-cost criteria. So in working in conjunction with CDM back in 2015, we determined that the level of experience, so how many installations each of the companies had, was pretty critical. And in comparison of Canby to ListTech, you can see that Canby is a little bit is more favorable as far as having more installations. There's also a non-cost criteria of ability to provide responsive support after startup. And then in this one, the two suppliers were actually pretty equal because they don't necessarily have large offices in the U.S. Canby is more in the UK, and then ListTech is in Canada. The next one was the company revenue. So in this one, Canby scored better than ListTech because their annual revenues are about 4 times more than ListTech's. So you can see the scores in there. The next one, which was one of the factors, critical factors, was the ability to produce Class A EQ solids. And this was kind of a non-cost criteria that was developed out of the IWRP through the extensive stakeholder process that we had. So TDEC and EPA have both weighed in on this and have kind of decided that through a different method of treatment that ListTech may achieve Class A, but it's the thermal hydrolysis process that Canby has already been approved to be a Class A process. So for ListTech to achieve the Class A process, they'd have to kind of change their system to more of a lime stabilization process, which is just an alkaline stabilization. They would be adding lime. So with Canby, we have the steam that's lysing the cells, that's producing the Class A product. With ListTech, we would be adding lime to raise the pH to 12. So that's killing all of the pathogens, and that's reducing the vector reduction. That is part of the EPA 503 regs that we're following. So that was a requirement that EPA had wanted them to do, was the vector reduction. So they can meet that, but it's a different process than just the straight thermal hydrolysis.
So let me chime in on that a little bit. One of the questions we had is the ability to reach that key component. That was one of the most important factors in going down this road, was to have that highest quality of biosolid product at the end. And basically, where I would say we are with regulators is they are not giving us a definitive answer. It's a little bit of a chicken-egg discussion in that they're saying, well, we want to know that you're committed to this process before we'll go through the full-blown analysis and let you know that we think it will or will not, or what you need to do to make it reach that Class A EQ standard. So it doesn't mean it won't. It just means that we would have to go through a similar process to what we did with Canby, which was to go through, basically provide a proof of how it works and what it would do and how it would reach those standards through, as Michelle described. In ListTech's situation, it's more of using the addition of the lime, raising the pH. There's also a physical process, churning process, that helps that happen as well. But but it's not a no, but it's not a yes either. And so we would need to invest time and effort in going through that. When we did it on the initial technology that was identified, it took several months. It took amount of time to do that. So that would all need to be factored in. I think we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about timeline impacts later on. But that's where it is. It's not a definitive answer. It doesn't necessarily scare you away from it, but it does add to the process, add to the investment in time and effort to get there without really a guarantee that it really is significantly better or different in terms of the end product, in terms of, I think, what we're seeing at this point.
Okay. So the last one on that page, just really quick, is the diversity of disposal options that are available. Can be rated a little bit higher, which is actually in turn a little bit lower. The lower scores are the more preferable. It's a little bit backwards. A little bit more preferable because it was a Class A EQ, which allows us to have a larger portfolio of disposal options. So we'll go to the next slide. So this is so this slide is, and I know it's a lot of words, is the proposed impacts to the project schedule. So right now our current schedule is, we received the permit and that became effective in July. So we've actually gotten word that SRF is wanting to give us an additional $20 million. So that would bring our total to $100 million. I think in mid-August, if that meeting's been set yet, I'm not sure okay, so in mid-August, the TLDA meeting is set, and that will be the final approval for SRF that we'll need to go ahead and start bidding the project. We would anticipate bidding late August or September, and then after the bid time, and then analyzing the bid, awarding it December or January of this year, and then a 3-year construction time would be completion in January of 2021. So then moving to the proposed schedule would kind of throw a little bit of delays into that. So we have in July is if the board to provide guidance on whether to move forward with the LISTEC system, with the LISTEC evaluation. That would take about 3.5 months to complete. And then provided that the board wanted to move forward with that, CDM would need an amendment to continue the design. There's a significant amount of drawings that would need to be redone. The LISTEC system is the Canby system. So the Canby system, the way it's designed now, will reduce some of our downstream equipment size. So pumps and tanks and in the different pieces of equipment that we have. Because LISTEC is a different type of system, all of that equipment is going to change sizes. So it's going to be bigger pumps, it's going to be bigger digesters, bigger tanks. So all of those drawing sheets that we have for the contractor need to be redesigned. We'll then need to start the permitting process again, so that'll be another 3 months. So that puts us at February 2019. And then it'll take a while, as it has already, to go through the SRF process again. And then we'll have the bidding and award, which would be March of 2020, with a 3-year construction completion date of March of 2023. So really, I highlighted the two on there. January 2021 is the construction date that we're set to go with the path now, and then the new construction date would be March of 2023 if we decide to move with this evaluation. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay. And so right now, so as I mentioned before, SRF has already approved an $80 million of funding of loans. And then we have an additional $20 million that I talked about that's going to be approved tonight and then later on. So with that, there's also going to be, so as with anything, the longer you delay something, the increase in construction time and the increase in construction costs, that's kind of unknown, due to inflation, due to other factors that would be outside of our control. So there could be an increase in cost with that. Right now, SRF, we actually, in another communication with SRF, they wanted to reduce our interest from 1.75 to 1.47%, which we had staff, or actually Christine did an analysis on that and saves us an additional $5 million, roughly $5 million. From the 1.75. So I have it on here. So she also did an analysis with comparing it to the 3.5% if we were to go with private bonds to privately fund this project. And in total, with the 1.47%, we're saving $33 million over the life of the loan. So in addition to that, there's also going to be the additional consulting costs that I indicated that CDM would need, the amendment to revise all the drawings, and then with the assistance for moving the project through TDEC again, through the TDEC approval process, and then the SRF work again.
One thing I wanted to point out, the SRF number we believe is conservative, but I think that's largely based on an ongoing process that we've been working with them on for the past several years. That number I think is probably the high end of what you would expect, but I just wanted to point that out. Some of the other cost is pretty tough when, and again, in order to get kind of that full cost evaluation between the two systems, we would have to continue doing some work, and hence the request for guidance this evening. We did request from Listec the capital costs of their existing installations, as well as contract terms with their customers. They did decline to provide that to us. And I did also want to add that in meeting with Listec, there is what generally would be expected is a disposal element between $25 and $35 per ton of treated biosolids. Put that in perspective, we pay $31.11 per ton with waste activated sludge. So I just wanted to point that out. Yes, sir.
So the 33 million is the difference between 1.75 and 1.47?
No, that's
No,
the
sir.
difference between
3.25.
Or if it was
Yeah,
a
what
bond
we
issue,
sold bonds for in January, which was revenue bonds.
3%
3.2 or
3.25 was
I
the
think,
number
yeah.
used in this analysis,
Yeah.
compared to 1.47.
And that's really, that difference may actually be larger because we borrowed that on a 20-year term. This is for a 30-year term, so that interest difference is probably a little wider here, but we wanted to go with what we knew and what the market gave us earlier this year.
So that was, again, a brief presentation. There's a lot more information in the memorandum that was presented, and certainly happy to answer any questions.
And I would just say, they're both good technologies. They have a lot of promise. And just as we look at it, though, I guess from a staff review and recommendation standpoint, I just don't think we see enough upside to justify spending the additional time and the additional resources to fully vet that out and make that call. That's a professional judgment looking at it. It's not a criticism of the other option, but I just don't see enough upside to justify delaying the project over 2 years and spending significant money to see if it's to really flesh out if it's better or how much better it could be. And at least these initial elements don't seem to show a significant difference. I think we avoid more chemicals in our process. We have a lower volume of biosolid at the end of the process. And we don't have the significant storage element. One of the things we've heard a couple different times is we'd need to have, with Listec, a storage capacity of somewhere around 6 months of capacity and storage. And so all of those elements, looking at being a good neighbor, looking at a process that's going to work and meet the needs of our community long term, I just don't see enough there to recommend to you to spend additional time and effort going down the road. So,
Alderman Martin?
We did not jump into this without thought. We gave it a lot of thought. We spent a lot of time. We've spent money on it. We came to an agreement that this was what we wanted, and we wanted that Class A at the end. We know we're going to get it with this. And we spent all this time and money on something else, and we don't know if we're going to get it or not. So I would really like to see us go on with our plans. And I appreciate your looking at the other one, but I just really don't see that we, as taxpayers, ourselves and the stewards of our taxpayers' money that we need to do this extra.
Vice Mayor?
Can you elaborate more on why the questions that you posed to them, they were not forthcoming, or was it just business?
I think the representative cited a quasi-private public
Okay.
arrangement. So I don't know, I don't know what really that means in terms of providing information freely about that. I don't know if that's a legal obligation or what, but so I don't know.
Mhm.
Do you have a preference as far as?
My preference, well, I agree with moving forward with what we have, the path we are on. The uncertainty right now, so we're not voting right now, but I would like to see us move forward with the plans. 3 years, 2 years, 3 years. That's money. Time is money. So.
I've got Alderman Barnhill.
So so the two numbers that you threw out were 2 years plus and $1.5 million just to study.
Well, in a portion of that, obviously the redesign, if you decide to stay with Canby, you don't have to spend that, but you've spent time getting there. But if you go through the whole thing, that's what you're gonna spend.
Okay.
Alderman Skinner.
I think there's too many unknowns. You know, if this had more of a history for this size application, we might consider this more, but it doesn't, to expend the additional time and money just to make an evaluation. We had a process. We went through the evaluation and a timeliness that I think it would not serve us well to short-circuit that and go back to revisit this. So I think we need to stay with the original recommendations.
Alderman McClendon.
I've got a couple of questions, and then I also want to ask the mayor's indulgence to allow any members of the public who may have some input here, because we have some of the stakeholders that have been part of this process that are here, and they may have something to add. Question, we're clear that we're not going forward with any greenhouses no matter what, right?
That is absolutely clear.
Okay.
Right.
Would the permit that has been issued, is it tied to Canby, or is it for a point discharge system that meets the requirements regardless of which method?
The NPDES discharge permit that we've received, is that what you?
Yes.
So that doesn't tie us into any specific biosolids process. It gives us
Parameters.
monitoring practices that we need to, monitor and report.
And standards we have to meet?
And standards we have to meet, right. But as far as whether we wanted to go Class B or Class A, it doesn't give any sort of requirement for
Okay.
that. So it doesn't
And
tie us to Canby or List A or anything.
If we were to do List A, let's assume we came to the conclusion that that was the best choice. This on-site storage, what are we looking at? A giant lake, a bladder, a tower?
There's
How
different,
big?
there's different methodologies. They talked about underground storage, a bladder system. You can use tankage. I don't recall the specific size, but it was a neighborhood of several million gallons of storage, as I understand it.
Okay, well, let's pretend I can't translate several million gallons in my head to,
I think it was between 3 and 6 months of storage.
The
Okay.
6-month number is the number we've consistently heard.
okay?
Yes.
What I really want to know is, what does that
What
look
does that
like
look
if I live
like?
next door to it?
Yeah.
Right. So the tank on Long Lane, the water reservoir on Long Lane is a 2 million gallon tank.
And so we might be looking at storing 3 times that?
I don't know, I'm sorry, I don't have that number. I can get that.
A large tank
It will be several million gallons.
that doesn't currently exist?
Correct.
Could that, is it possible that's a tank, a bladder, or a lagoon?
There are different options you can use, yes, so.
But in any event, we'd have to.
That would be part of your design solutions and things you look at.
Okay. I guess this is just the nature of the beast. I appreciate staff's effort. As someone who is not an engineer or a scientist or anything like that, It's just, I guess I had just hoped that there would be a numerically clear result. And I mean, maybe if we spent $1.5 million, we would have that. But I'm not even sure we would. And I guess my disappointment is with wastewater treatment science. It just seems like there should be a way to quantify which mousetrap is better. Because I'm convinced, I never doubted, but I'm convinced that we all want the best mousetrap, considering cost and time and results. To be honest with you, $1.5 million redesign doesn't faze me in the midst of a $100 million loan. To be honest with you, a 2-year delay doesn't trouble me at all for a 20 or 30-year decision, if we're right. Okay? I'm perfectly happy to pay $1.5 million more to get the best mousetrap. I'm perfectly happy to wait another 2 years to get the best solution for our community, measured in every way, subjective and objective. The best plant as far as the neighbors are concerned, the best plant as far as the water quality is concerned, the best plant as far as the taxpayers are concerned in terms of its efficiency and the cost of operation and its ability to meet ever increasingly stringent standards. $1.5 million one way or the other doesn't bother me. 2 years one way or the other doesn't bother me if we get the right thing. I had just hoped that by now somebody could put a white paper with 2 columns together and
Black and white.
yeah, and I mean, I understand the point of this matrix, but if I were cross-examining you, it would be brutal, because there's so many subjective weights, just on the weights alone. I mean, why weight one thing more than the other? And what's the difference between a 1 and a 2? And I mean, so, like I said, I'm grateful to staff for all that they've done. I'm grateful to the board for pausing this process and saying, let's be right about this. It's a 20 or 30-year decision. It's a $100 million loan. It's important that we get this right. I just, as I sit here now, I am no more convinced that one is more right than the other than I was when we hit the pause button. And I mean, at some point, I guess I'm going to say, well, we felt confident with the decision we had made, and the alternative maybe hasn't demonstrated to be clearly better, and therefore I guess we go on. I'm not there yet. It's just frustrating to not have the personal know-how to read the technical data and really speak that language, while at the same time trying to get this right. And apparently, it sounds to me like if we had picked Listec to begin with and Canby came along at this point in the process and said, hey, consider us, staff might very well reach the same conclusion. No reason to change course, is what I hear. That Canby hasn't been so obviously a better choice, or that Listec is not so obviously a better choice that we should switch to it at this point. But it sounds like if we had been on the Listec horse all this while, staff might very well have concluded that there was no compelling reason to shift to Canby. So
let me comment on that a little bit. One of the things we did evaluate in the process was alkaline approach to getting to a Class A, and we determined that the use of the chemicals, that it's messier. So it wasn't exactly Listec, and Listec is a little bit of a hybrid between the alkaline and what you chose, the Canby system. And so in some ways it's a between those two kind of things, but we did look at elements that are applicable to saying whether you want to go down this road or not. We're pulling on at least some knowledge in some elements of the decision-making process throughout the IWRP. But you're right, there's ever-changing and evolving approaches to this stuff. And we can't answer it definitively, but there's investment in time and effort to get to there, and we may be in no different place a year or so from now either. I wish we could answer it a little more black and white, but I think some of these elements were in your process before.
One other question I would have is, between the two, which, if either, appears to be more adaptable over the useful life of the plant? In other words, which one appears to be more likely to rise to the next most stringent standard we're given? Which of the two, if either, is more adaptable to a larger volume? Which of the two is more likely adaptable to changes in, the availability of the chemicals we use, or whatever, whatever the case may be? Is there any way to project which of these two is a better system in 10 years?
The Canby unit itself was sized for build-out condition. There's a really large size, which, we saw in Europe, and then we have this kind of skid-mounted unit that will treat the solids beyond what we would anticipate to have in the city of Franklin. In terms of Listec, I understand that what we would get from them would be of similar capability. It does require that you have the addition of chemical, which is an ongoing cost, and then of course you add bulk to it. So in a pH of 12, so that does limit, in some respects, disposal opportunity. As we went through this process, Listec, I think, originally came out as like this liquid fertilizer process. They have since then been able to dewater their solids to about a 30% solids, so it provides other options in terms of disposal, but you still have that pH element to deal with. It's arguable that Canby, may have better disposal opportunity. Listec, though, I think some might argue that you have this lime addition which helps treat soil. So,
depending on the soil.
Right. Depending. So, I think that, again, Eric had mentioned, I think they're both processes we think work well. I don't think that Listec at this point jumps out and says, I'm so much better than Canby. In fact, I don't know that it jumps out in any respects that say, hey, I'm so much better than Canby, we need to switch to that, or recommend a switch to that.
There's no quantifiable and clear plant construction cost savings, but that's not because they wouldn't actually happen. It's because there are so many unknowns until you plan. You'd almost have to plan the two completely to be able to compare the difference.
Correct.
I think that's fair.
And
there is one component that I would talk about, and it's in the memo. There's some discussion as to whether you could use Listec and skip digestion altogether. That's a whole other path in terms of what we're not just talking about Class A, then we're talking about other elements in terms of the permitting of our operation. There are no U.S. operations that don't have digestion with this technology.
Well,
I think I don't see us going down a path where we would eliminate the digestion component. If you did that, you could have some savings. But if you have digestion, you actually need to upsize to handle Listec because the volumes are higher, the nature of that process, as I understand it.
You also lose the ability to co-generate heat and energy as well, which
part of this dilemma is because we're a forward-thinking community, and between the two, either one, we'd be the second plant in the U.S. And the only Canby plant in the U.S. is so much larger than the one we would build. I don't want to say it's not a relevant comparison, but it's an altogether different place. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, it's Canby, but it's Washington DC, it's massive.
Right.
And
Fairfield
the-
Sassoon
and
would
the
also
other
be
one-
Okay,
considered.
and the other in the Listec system in California is also sized to manage a metropolitan area, a major metropolitan area. So part of, I think, our dilemma is that we're attempting to be so good at what we do and employ the best practices that we're in this world where there is no off-the-shelf, just put in a few more trenches and do it the way you've always done it option. I mean, we're going to be on the cutting edge of either one. And I mean, I'm not afraid to be ahead of our time as long as we're certain that we're right. Once upon a time, the ATAD system was the bee's knees, and we know how that worked out. So,
Yeah, I also wanted to point out, CDM Smith, our consultant, is evaluating Listec in other parts of the country as well. So, I mean, it is not a technology that's frowned upon by them nor us. It's just where we are, and again, not rising up and that says that, Listec is so much better than Canby.
I'll recognize Alderman Berger, then I have Alderman Blanton, but Alderman McClendon mentioned that there might be some people who want to speak. I have no speaker cards from anyone. If there's someone who wants to speak,
Mr.
I
Vaughn
need to
has
have it, Mr. Vaughn. I can't see it if you have it in your pocket. You're welcome to bring it up, sure.
Just while we're waiting, I was going to say Trinity River in Texas is also doing Canby right now, but they have like 10 times as much.
It's a
There-
large,
There's
it's
a
a large
significant
operation.
number of
Significant.
utilities that are also considering Canby now.
But they've
Hampton
already started
Roads
in
is
it.
Trinity River,
So
yes.
so I'm going to go ahead and recognize Alderman Berger.
Before I comment, Michelle, you were about to say something. Did you want to say something else?
That's what I was going
Oh,
to say. There's a
okay.
significant
I
number
just
of
wanted
other
to put that
utilities
off.
that are working on Canby as well.
Margaret's absolutely right. We've looked and looked and looked at this. We've studied it forever. Dana, you make some great comments. I mean, honest to Pete, I think that those are all valid comments. But when it comes down to it, and I look at what we have found, we look at less alkaline, less chemicals. We have the life, of course, I have a question about the life of the system, but less alkaline, the chemicals, has better disposal, reuse options due to the lower pH that we're gonna get with them, aren't we? With
Well, due
Canby?
to the
Yeah,
Class A
right.
exceptional quality
So-
solid,
so-
yeah.
So the alkalines, okay, exactly. And then we have the anaerobic digestion reuse, that's not restricted. Basically, we get a higher class with that. We're
Right.
sure of that. Less volume, less storage, complies with EPA for Class A, okay. And back to the better disposal and reuse options. I think that's enough for me. I think I'm okay with that, because I like that. And I think that those things are very, very important, long-term. And I like the fact that the anaerobic digestion and also the less alkaline, less chemicals, I think is very good. And we had discussed that at length at one time, a year ago or so, with our in-depth discussions, and I think that was paramount for me, one of the things that, in my readings on the system. So, the only other thing I would ask is, what about the whole life of the system?
Of the equipment?
Yeah, of this whole system, yeah, that we would have to replace to continue. What are we talking about? I don't
Comparison
remember.
between the two,
Yeah,
or I
possibly.
think different components are gonna fail in the 20 to 25-year range.
Okay, that's
I think
reasonable.
there's different elements that are gonna, the vessels would likely have a larger life. They go through an annual inspection process. These, mechanical
Okay,
structure.
20, 25 years.
But they're anticipated to
Okay.
be that kind of life cycle.
Right, I just want to know.
I don't know that
I
there's
just
a
wanna know about the
significant
life
difference
cycle of
there.
it. So, all right, fine.
What is the life of our permit?
5 years.
And then we reapply and.
Yeah, it's,
I got Alderman Blanton.
Okay,
Real quick,
thank you.
I think it bears repeating for the audience, for the people paying attention, and for me personally. background, the integrated water resource plan was in motion when I got here, and it had been a project for, I don't even know when it started. If somebody can tell me that, that would be helpful.
2009, 2010.
Okay, so
Yeah.
since 2009, we've been looking at the framework of taking care of what is a very delicate part of our community. And even though Cambry is where we were leaning towards and Listec came through towards the end, I think it's important to note that we chose Cambry tentatively out of a field of other candidates. It's not as if, I want everyone to know, and I want to remind ourselves, we've already done a selection process that led with Cambry as the choice. And I think after the outcry and concern of a neighborhood by there, we've done our due diligence to go back and look at suggestions to look at other options. And this option was brought to us. So for myself and for everyone who's paying attention and maybe didn't get to the dance when we did, we've paused, as Dana said, to look at another opportunity that's been brought to us. And what seems to me is it's not meeting the criteria of what we went for in the beginning. I have been to the plant. I have seen the product that comes down the conveyor belt that is full of water, of waste product that comes through our sewer system that we have to haul away to a place to dispose of it. And because our antiquated system right now cannot get the liquid out of that, we're paying more to haul liquid than we are actual waste. It's all gross to talk about, and I'm trying to find the right words that make it shrouded.
It's great to talk about.
But, yeah, that's what you do for a living. I've quit changing diapers a long time ago. But anyway, I guess I wanted to say that because I think sometimes we get in the weeds of dealing with the decisions that are in front of us today, and we're not able to kind of go back and look to see how we got here. And for those paying attention who ask us to make these decisions, I think it's important to kind of maybe give a little bit more of an overview. So.
Alderman Peterson, did you want to make a comment?
No.
Okay. Anybody else? Well, I think that, you know, I wouldn't mind just making a quick comment in that, you know, I've been involved with this process since 2009 or 10, and so I started out with the original committee and have gone the full length. So I don't think any of this has been hastily evaluated. It's been actually very, very thorough, and I feel comfortable that staff and our consultants looked at many alternatives before they came up with this Canby system. I don't know that I can, you know, I would take a little bit of opportunity to say I don't think we have the wrong system picked. I think we had another option given to us. I think Canby is certainly a good alternative that we have, and that's where we arrived. So if there's no other comments, I want to ask Mr. Vaughn to come up, give you a couple of minutes if I could.
Yeah, sure,
Mike.
I'm not gonna take, you mean stand here or
Come sit with us, whatever you like. We're a friendly bunch. We just can't read your mind when you have this in your pocket.
All right, well, for everybody's benefit, I'm Mike Vaughn. I'm the former Chestnut Bend HOA president, and I'm just a resident now. But I do support our HOA. And so all along I've been concerned about two things. You know, I live in Chestnut Bend. I don't plan on going anywhere. So it's where the grandkids will come, and unless somebody comes along and gives me a mountain chateau somewhere that's going to entice me to move away from Utopia here in Franklin. Don't see that happening. So as the HOA president, I started looking and addressing this this plan that the city was putting together, and we kind of discovered it by default when somebody from wastewater treatment plant called somebody in our neighborhood and said, hey, you probably ought to pay attention to this. So until that time, we didn't even know what was going to be going on over there. So I work in a pharmaceutical background. I make drugs, so I'm pretty adept with federal regulations and processes and things like that. So I dug into this, and so, you know, when I found the Listec system, it was because I started looking at where in other parts of the country was Canby being considered. And so I found in Palo Alto, California, that they had looked at the Canby system as well as others, and I'm sure that they went through a due diligence process similar to what City of Franklin went through. And they decided they didn't want the Canby system because it was not technologically feasible to meet their needs and it was too expensive. So as a process, as a result of their process, Palo Alto, California, I mean, that's what really rung to, it was Stanford University, Menlo Park. They said, too expensive for us. And I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty significant. So I followed up and found the Listec people, and you know, they were, you know, well-funded, and Tomlinson Group is a billion-dollar company in Canada, not like your revenues were showing on your slides there, and invited them down here. So it's like, okay, maybe we found a solution that's different. Everybody's been working hard, getting their processes going. City government does what they do, and you know, disposing of waste is the oldest problem to mankind. So, but we live right next door to it, so it's in our backyard every day, so we pay attention to it. So Listec comes down, and so then the first thing that they did was they sent a questionnaire. Now, back to my pharmaceutical business, what we do before we decide to, when we want to hire a contract manufacturer, we have to fill out a questionnaire, which is a request for information. It's not a request for proposal. It's a request for information. And so then I looked a little bit further into Tennessee procurement laws and things like that, just to be a student of this so I can be a little bit knowledgeable, certainly not as knowledgeable as everybody here. But it's acceptable for municipal government, even if they want to use the Municipal Technical Advisory Service from the University of Tennessee or some other entities to make requests and to complete a request for information. It's not a violation of any bid process to get information. So I know that, you know, Listec sent an email and sent their questionnaire to the city of Franklin on the 31st, right after their meeting, and they asked them to fill it out. And it's just like we would do when we were going to go have a product made. We got to fill it out, and then the company will decide, well, do I want to offer you a proposal or not? So what happened is this never got filled out, this questionnaire, and it was also sent back on June the 8th. It was never filled out. I think we could have avoided a lot of this delay and anguish over money because Listec was prepared to complete the questionnaire and give the city of Franklin a conditional proposal with cost numbers in it, real numbers. And they have a lot of innovative solutions. They just won the Canadian Water Technology of the Year Award for their wastewater processing. So we never gave them the opportunity to do a baseline proposal for you guys to consider, so then you could start to go through these steps if you did want to pursue them. And that's what's unfortunate, because they're still, on June the 8th, they sent another request to say, hey, will you guys just complete the questionnaire? We'll give you a full-blown proposal. We'll give you cost estimates. We'll do all of that, but it's not getting done. And so, you know, that's for me very frustrating just as a part of the process. It's simple. Just I could fill the questionnaire out and not, if you guys want to pay me 10% of 1.2 million, I think I can get it done cheaper than CDM Smith. But literally, this can be filled out by somebody that is in the engineering department in one day. And I think if Listec were given the opportunity, they would be able to offer the city a proposal that at least they could start to put their teeth into without spending any money for any kind of engineering or anything. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, just on some of these bullet points.
You'll go ahead and wind up.
I'll wind up real quick. So they don't use liquid disposal. They use dry disposal. So they have, and then the other thing is Canby had to have a workaround with the Department of Environment Conservation to achieve Class A EQ, which is the same thing George Garden from the TDEC said that they would need to have official application from the city of Franklin in order to properly evaluate them. So I think there's some misinformation there. There's no tipping fee required for them to, they will buy their own material. They'll even invest in a plant themselves and own it 100%. They've done this in other places around the country. So I would just implore you to go ahead and fill out the questionnaire. It's not going to violate your bid process, and move ahead that way. And then you don't have to worry about spending money with CDM Smith and all that kind of thing. So thank you for allowing me to talk with you.
Can I ask you one question?
Yes, ma'am.
What did you just say about some places around the country,
They are in St. Cloud, Minnesota right now in a public-private partnership where they were just approved to participate in a green project up there with them. They have a public-private co-sharing of revenues in their Fairfield facility out in San Francisco. They own 3 or 4 plants, I forget how many, up in Canada where they outright own it.
Yeah, okay, that's one I.
Yeah.
All right.
And what do they do with their treated process then? You said
Up
they'll-
there, it's a
they'll
high,
take it?
it's a high, they'll buy
They
it,
buy
they
it.
own it. They have a
have to buy it.
agricultural market in Canada that
Yeah.
is, it's big row crop farms up there where they've got this one plant, and it's a top fertilizer, and so it's better than petroleum-based
Right.
fertilizers, so,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Pete.
Okay, any other comments? You ready to move on? Item number
Well-
5 is proposed draft ordinance to amend Title 17, Refuse and Trash Disposal of the Franklin Municipal Code for the purpose of clarifying service, container ownership, clarifying type of service for consistent building, and other general housekeeping.
We had deferred this from last meeting, we just ran out of time. This is some updates that we're proposing to our Title 17 that deals with how we classify our customers and look at some of the different ways we provide basically refuse collection to different types of customers. So this, we think, will clarify that in terms of how we operate and clean up some other language along the way as well. So Mark's going to take us through that.
The Sanitation Environmental Services and the Law Department are continuing to work through draft language to present to you all. But we wanted to, I guess, very briefly talk through some of the anticipated proposed changes with you all, just so you had a heads up, and when the item came before you, it wasn't a surprise to you. So I'm going to run through them very quickly. Please let me know if you have any questions. One of the current issues that we have is defining a customer. The current municipal code follows really the water management, Title 18 code structure. There are different types of customers between water management and sanitation environmental services. The proposed change we're looking at is to keep it fairly basic. We have a residential customer and a non-residential customer, one with rollout service, one with dumpster service, instead of any number of different other types of customers that you might run into. One of the conditions or concerns that issues we've run into in the past is the actual ownership of the containers once Sanitation Environmental Services delivers it to the property. In municipal code, it indicates that the city retains ownership, but another section of municipal code indicates that the property owner purchases it from the city. So we would like to clean that language up, and instead of using the purchase language, use some type of language that refers to an administrative setup fee or something of that nature. So a pretty basic change. One thing that the current code does not provide for is backdoor services. Now, of course, we don't want to provide backdoor services to, that would make operations with sanitation environmental services really unwieldy. There are a number of citizens in the community that could benefit from that, people with limited mobility, things of that nature. So we would set it up such that they go through an application process, and we can provide that service to them. Again, based on the need of the occupant or the homeowner. One of the other things that is not documented in municipal code is guidelines for revenue management. We do have practices and policies that are established, and they're long, ongoing practices, but we want to memorialize them in municipal code in some respects, and make sure that we have that document to refer to. So we want to add that, and also include timeframes for billing, penalties, receipting, and things of that nature. And that is the major changes that we're going to be touching on, aside from a couple editorial issues. Yes, sir.
Can I
Ma'am.
also see where there would be an annual renewal of the backdoor service?
Yes, we would.
So that we'll keep that.
Right, make sure that it's, yes.
The current person is there or not.
Correct.
Don't we, I was just glancing through that and actually kind of maybe lost position. Don't we charge the developer whatever $50 or $60 for that rollout container, or do we not?
There is a charge for it, so they pay it.
So doesn't the property owner then, do they not own that? Or is
Well, I
one
think
where
that
they'll own it?
it's actually,
Me, I don't-
Stays with the address.
yeah, it's supposed to stay with the address, so.
Well, okay,
that-
all right, you
yeah,
buy it
that-
for the address,
Mhm.
but you pay for it.
That's what we want to clarify.
Setup fee.
Because-
That's what
Yeah.
I'm referring to as setup fee, with that second can in particular.
Right.
Yeah.
It blends language between purchase and
All right.
additional
The
service.
administrative
and
costs.
So we want to
set up
clean that up.
accountants
So,
and
the-
things
but
of
the
that nature.
the $50 or $60 will still probably stay.
There will be some administrative fee.
Okay.
And, again, and I don't know the cost of, if I go out and buy a 96-gallon roll-off container, is that the cost that's actually charged?
Yeah.
But that fee is to accommodate the time and costs associated with setting up accounts, bringing the container out to the property. So there's all this time and expense that the city incurs when doing that, so.
Oh, I understand. You
Mhm.
replace them, you repair them, you do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Mayor, I just want to say, I have 2 cans because I had too many people in my house. Now I don't, but it's $75 to purchase an additional can, but it's also, I believe, $7.50 a month to pick up
That's
that
correct.
extra one.
Yes.
Now, I don't have that many people, so I really need to call and go, hey, come pick up your extra can, because I could save $7.50 a month.
Right.
But I have not done that, so. But the way I thought too, based on how this read, I purchased it, so it was mine, but it's not really mine. I just have 2 that are owned by the city and maintenance by them.
Right.
If you
That's-
repeat yourself, they might come pick up the.
Yeah, Becky, if you're watching, go ahead and come get it.
We can-
Any other
Nate?
comments? So you're gonna be bringing something with
Yes, sir.
a more
A
updated document?
specific,
Ordinance
ordinance
language.
amendment, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Next is, interlocal agreement with Williamson County government to redistribute the half of the 1.5 cents per, man, that's not even a hard one.
Yes, we agreed on that.
Consideration of an interlocal agreement with Williamson County government to redistribute the half of the 0.5% sales tax increase that is not allocated for schools.
So this is what Mayor Anderson spoke to you about last meeting. I just kept this on here to just provide an opportunity to clarify anything. We did put a little more specific information in here regarding the numbers in terms of what we think it may generate. They're probably a little conservative because they're based off of FY17, but that would be essentially, and of course, this is all contingent upon the voters approving the tax. And so if that were approved, would you want to allocate for the first 3 years, the city's half to support education funding, specifically debt service and capital project funding? And that number, we estimate, again, probably a little bit on the low side, would be about $23.1 million over the 3 years that would otherwise have come to the city. Total, the 2 halves together, that's $46.2 million over the 3-year period that would go towards debt service and/or capital funding. So I just wanted to give you that because there was a little bit of confusion when we discussed that, and also give you a brief opportunity if you have questions. Of course, it's on the agenda tonight at the voting session as well, if you'd like to enter into the interlocal agreement.
Comments?
It's going.
Alderman Clinton?
I could probably sell my house by this time tomorrow, if I wanted to. And my house isn't that special. But it's in the Williamson County school zones, and it's in what I consider to be a very desirable Williamson County school zone. For my own selfish reasons, I support putting this question on the ballot. But for much bigger reasons than just that, I think we should do this. I think this is an opportunity for us to make sure that our schools are funded in a way that we all wish that they were. So now, if the voters disagree, that's fine. But I, for one, am willing to have that decision made. So I'll support this.
And really,
Alderman Peterson.
we're not losing anything from where we are right now.
We don't have.
You know, it would just be, for those 3 years, and then after that, we'd have more money.
Any other comments? Okay, we're going to next consider items 7 through 10, having to do with annexation of property on Long Lane. I think that's all I'm going to say,
Brad,
rather
sure
than
you will.
read all those things,
Sure.
Brad, which you wrote.
Sure. So to be brief, this is a property that is located on Long Lane. There's multiple different items in front of you. This is for both the adopting the plan of service, for the resolution and ordinance, the ordinance and the resolution. It is for 30 single-family homes. It is adjacent to the existing Lad Park subdivision. Envision Franklin does support single-family on this piece of property. And staff supports it, and Planning Commission recommended approval as well.
Any questions about it, Alderman
What is
Martin?
that little white area right there that's not checked?
I'm not sure.
You know
Kind of a
that-
little tiny donut
That
hole
little thing
square.
right there.
That part may have needed to be included in that site plan. Oh, and if you actually go to the
Oh, yeah.
resolution, the
This one right
resolution
here.
ordinance, it is
It's
included.
what?
But it
is included.
Uh-huh.
It is included.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the other
But it
one.
doesn't have this.
Yeah, and that must have just been an error on my part to not include that hatch on that particular map. It is on the resolution ordinance.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
The park she's talking about, how much acreage is that?
I believe that the total was.
No, not the total project, but the part that's not checkered in.
The entire, and I know you're not, is 15.3. I don't know if I have that additional part here.
Is somebody else on that? Is that why it's not in that straight line?
No, it is all part of the,
I don't remember when you presented it to the joint meeting. I don't remember that being there.
Look, I don't mind going through the process. Look at that and make sure that
That's a good point.
there's been, I think the recording of the deed on those two, on that, the checkered and the non-checkered are at two different times.
Mm.
Okay,
Mhm.
so therefore, that's possibly the reason that that's out. Now, I don't know that for a fact, and it's possible that there may even be different ownership at one time between those two different things there. So
we'll take
just
a look
at
at
that.
that
See.
for sure.
And all of it's coming for a.
And all of it's,
public hearing.
and all of it's coming back for
So
public
you can
hearing.
just
and it all
clarify
comes-
that.
Yeah, yeah, and you'll have a bond, yeah.
Good question. Any other comments? Alderman Skinner?
I had some questions this week about, people called in and asked about the stormwater buffer. And whether some of these properties encroached into the stormwater buffer, and what was the responsibility of the city to make sure that the no-cut zone near the creek bank was observed. So I'd like to have something from stormwater, for us to have some guidance
Sure.
on.
I know that there were two different zones within that, and I believe that they did an averaging of that stormwater buffer, which they are able to do.
Okay, that's within our
Yes.
current stormwater policy.
Yes.
And then, does the city actually go out and enforce encroachment
Yes.
into those no-cut zones?
Mhm.
Okay.
They do.
Okay, item 11 is ordinance 2017-24 to be entitled an ordinance to rezone .43 acres from residential R3 district to office residential OR district for the property located at the southeast corner of Columbia Avenue and Carolyn Avenue. Josh?
Thank you, Mayor. This is an existing house at the corner of Columbia and Carolyn. The address is 1475 Columbia Avenue. Envision Franklin recommends an office residential concept which allows selected commercial uses in a general residential form. This is the least intensive commercial district that we have, and both staff and Planning Commission recommended approval.
Any comments or questions? Alderman Martin and Alderman Blanton, and I have Mr. Hazelwood who wanted to make a comment. You can come on up, Mr. Hazelwood,
The
and
lot,
sit down with us.
the lot next to that, south of that lot, that's residential.
Yes.
Is there any discussion from that resident to make his OR?
We have not had any discussions with that
I
owner.
hate to see just that one lot just sitting there with OR, and the lot next to it not. There's just one lot next to it.
Well, the lot behind it too.
Could someone
Well,
tell
no,
me
I
what
mean,
the-
but it's facing Columbia Avenue.
Colors. Walk me through the colors.
The green represents residential zone.
Uh-huh.
The sort of light purple is neighborhood commercial zone. Red is, I believe, central commercial.
I think that's right.
So there's a variety of commercial districts in and around that area.
And what's the tan?
That's a specific development zone. I believe that's General's Retreat.
It is.
The Alderman Blanton?
Yes, sir. I wasn't at the Planning Commission meeting, but I did watch it on television, and Mr. Hazelwood will speak to most of what I could say, so I'm gonna let you say it. But while the zoning was approved, the site plan is yet to be approved, is that correct?
It has not been.
Under the zoning would come before a site plan would on this site.
Right, wasn't the zoning approved at the Planning Commission?
The zoning is only, a rezoning is only approved by this board at the
Well,
third
so
reading.
okay.
It was
Anyway.
recommended.
One thing that was spoken about, and I'm sure Don will bring it up, is ample screening between the residential area and the proposed commercial area. But my question is looking at the legislative text, it talks about a new entrance being part of it suggested. Explain that to me.
There's currently a U-shaped driveway on Carolyn Avenue from this property. Engineering has requested that one of the driveway legs be closed because it is too close to the intersection of Carolyn and Columbia Avenue.
Okay. So that it would be further down Carolyn as opposed to closer to Columbia.
Correct. It's not new, it's just eliminating one of the driveway entrances.
And how many parking places are they able to put on this zoning?
They would have to meet the underlying parking requirements for their proposed uses. We don't, at this time, I don't have a build-out plan for what they're proposing. I believe, working with the applicant, everything was internal. They're not proposing any new changes to the outside. So whatever they do inside, they will have to be able to park and adequately screen on site.
But you can't tell me how many parking places they can add until their plans, okay.
The general
Like a-
requirement is 3.33 per 1,000. This is a traditional zone. So if there's 1,000, the applicant would have to park about 4 cars there.
Alderman Martin?
At the Planning Commission meeting, I believe it was mentioned that if this were to be OR, they would be allowed to do anything in that spot that is permitted in OR. And if they wanted to tear it down, they could build an office building. However, in here somewhere, I read, it has to be maintained as a residential appearance.
Correct.
You can't tear it down and build a box,
Correct.
because it has to remain the house.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is correct. This property is also within the Columbia Avenue overlay, so it has an additional layer of protection on it that works with roof form, development type, general appearance, lighting standards, but also signage.
Okay.
John? Welcome. You got 2 minutes.
Was the buzzer on tonight?
I had it, but it's not very loud. Believe me, I try to control it, but sometimes it doesn't work.
Thank you for letting me speak to this group, and thank you, Mayor, and all the aldermen. I don't know anything about what you guys do. I'm a fish out of water. Crowds don't bother me unless I've got a guitar in my hand, and they don't bother me at all then. But anyway, my mother's 94 years old, and she's been living there since 1967. And the view from out her bedroom window is the property on the that side of us. And to see her look out and see a parking lot, and okay, gonna have 5 offices, 5 people, 5 parking places. If they all have customers, then that's 10. So she's gonna see 10 cars parked next door on an asphalt parking lot. Where's that water going? Number one. Now it's seeping in the ground. Where's it going when we get a parking lot? I've asked for a screen between the 2 properties. And again, I don't understand what goes first, the chicken or the egg, but if a site plan has to be approved, then the day they closed or shortly after, we looked out the front porch and looked to the left, and there's a dumpster about 30 foot long and a porta-john within 5 feet of my property line and probably within 10 feet of Carolyn Avenue. I'm not sure if you have to put a porta-john next to the highway, next to my property. I'm not sure about any of that, but there is a driveway where that dumpster is. It's a gravel driveway, very old, and I think it was added at a later date. I'm not sure about that, but there's a little garage at the back of it, and that's been there for years, and it's not been used very often. So all I ask is that I keep hearing if you do commercial and if you do this, but yet it's not commercial. Well, it is commercial. However you look at it, whether it looks like a house, it sounds like a house, and it feels like a house, it's still a house, but nobody's living in it. So it's not residential. I've already got a Airbnb on one side of me with a shared driveway, and now I'm gonna have another business on the other side of me. What is that gonna do to the property value for my 94-year-old mother? I have no idea. Hey, maybe you guys know how to judge that. I don't have a clue. And I guess last but not least, Carolyn Avenue is, if you've never been on it, is 1 block. The only way that this property can be accessed is from Carolyn Avenue. So we have 5, maybe 10 cars per day added to Carolyn Avenue. And everybody on Carolyn Avenue are old folks, I guess including myself. But they're very old, and they've been there a long time. And they already have enough trouble getting on Columbia Pike as it is.
Are you on Carol, I mean, is she on Carolyn?
Yes, first house on Carolyn.
All right, she's right behind
So
this
I'm
thing.
looking right in the back door of that property.
Would you be able to meet with Mr. Hazelwood and maybe discuss some of those questions that he's asked and clarify some of those?
Absolutely, Mayor. Well, we'd be happy to meet with this gentleman and the current owner of the house. In terms of the dumpster location and porta-john, we can work with our Building and Neighborhood Services Department on it. We cannot put any conditions on the rezoning. The rezoning has to be a straight up or down vote. So there are no staff conditions. We can't do if you rezone this, we'll give you this or won't give you that. It is an up or down vote.
But where can we ask for adequate screening and a fence instead of vegetation and?
If the property is required to submit a site plan, all of those rules would come into effect. At this time, it does not, there's not a site plan that's been proposed, but the applicant is, I'm not sure if they're in the audience, but at least they're watching from home.
Oh, awesome.
Hey.
When is how many votes will it take?
It'll take 3 votes.
Including the public hearing on 2. When's the first hearing?
August 8th.
Okay. Will you let me know whether or not screening goes in?
Yes.
It won't go then, I guarantee you before the end of it.
And I'll be here.
Alderman Peters?
Maybe I'll get better.
If you notice, it was an 8-to-1 vote. I voted against recommending this. Several concerns that I have. first of all, this is a piece of a residential subdivision. You know, it's Highland Gardens, I think. maybe.
70 years old.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, another thing that I realized, and I was not aware whenever Envision Franklin came out, that there was a separate page that showed potential things for office residential, including down Columbia Avenue. As was already stated, there are a lot of different commercial zones and actually things that are commercial that are very close to this. However, I also, in reviewing this, noticed that the Columbia Avenue overlay had been amended somewhat recently, that it used to say no parking between the building and Columbia Avenue and any other street. It has recently been amended to say only no parking between the building and Columbia Avenue. So up until that time, there could not have been any parking between the building and Carolyn either. And that could have made a difference. The problem though, you know, the next residence is very close to the property line here. And the gravel driveway back there, and as you say, now it's got the dumpster and all the other things on it and everything. There are a lot of changes going on in this area. In fact, there are a lot of things where they're tear down and, you know, builds up something 2 or 3 times as big as the building that's on there. So obviously it's in transition somewhat, but I did have some concerns about moving this one. And I noticed that on the new Envision Franklin, virtually everything up and down this, including a place where I used to live that's pretty close to this, of course that was many years ago, that I cannot possibly imagine becoming an office. To tell you the truth. So, and I don't know about this building as it is becoming an office.
Eric, I
Mr.
think
Mayor,
it's
let me clarify
clarified.
the schedule. I didn't say that right, because this won't have first reading until your August 8th meeting. And so that would mean public hearing would not happen until September 12th, and then third and final would be September 26th. Did I do that right, Lynette? Okay. So I had assumed that it was on tonight for first reading. It is not. So public hearing would not happen until September 12th.
Okay. Any other comments? Ready to move on?
So in the meantime, construction goes on. I'm, again, lost.
No, it hadn't been
Nothing should
rezoned yet.
happen.
May we speak to that?
Sure, come on up. Give your name.
My name is Paul Bass. I'm actually one of the owners on this parcel right now. And what it is, we are going to retain the full 1,400 square feet. It's going to match kind of the language of what you have directly north of this site, what was done on the opposite corner. The end use of it will be a professional civil engineering office for Matt Bryant. He's got 2 employees, and that's the extent. So traffic, you're looking at 3 to 4 cars max. And
That's now. We rezone forever.
and I understand that.
He could
but-
flip that in 6 months and put 10 people in there.
Well, and that's not the intent, nor will we be able to
I
park that.
understand that, but I can't make decisions based upon what he's gonna do.
And I agree.
Next month.
But it's no different than my professional firm. I've got an architecture firm. We're 1104 West Main. No impact to the locals. I've got 6 employees, and it's 0 impact. I mean, it's a viable option for small businesses, and that's the reason we choose to use it. In terms of the permit, we do have a residential permit trying to rectify some of the issues that are consistent with that house right now. Like I said, we're just bringing it up to standards that are adjacent to the property north of us. In regards to the question on the south parcel, we actually reached out to that owner. It's a rental property right now, and they have been non-responsive in terms of discussing potentially rezoning that property.
Do you have any plans for buffering from the adjacent?
As Josh mentioned, we're not affecting the site, but we'd be glad to put a landscape buffer or whatever's necessary to appease. I mean, again, we're not, I mean, to your point, based on the use that is intended and we plan to hold to, we're looking at maybe 3 to 4 cars max, and you're looking at traffic patterns Monday through Friday of 7:30 to 5 p.m.
Well,
How many offices are you gonna have?
We'll have 4 offices in a shared conference room for the,
I could be wrong, but when I spoke to Matt on the phone, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, you had talked about the potential to maybe lease a couple of the other spaces for something low impact, like an attorney.
we have
So
a,
I just have to say, from what I understood, it wasn't just a single-use office for one company.
we have a potential that a mechanical plumbing engineer may come in and use one office. So, and like I said, I'm an architect. We're trying to keep it in our niche group of consultants that we utilize.
Just for his office?
Yes. Currently, he's working out of his house, and he would like to have an address.
That would be another vehicle, correct?
It would be 3 to 4, yes.
I need to ask a question. As I remember on office residential, isn't screening required?
Screening is required if a site plan is required.
So you're saying that after rezoning, you don't have to have a site plan?
If you're not changing enough of the site or enough of the physical structure, there's a chance you would not need a site plan.
Well, the reason I'm asking that is because whenever we talked about the ones over on Royal Oaks, we were told that there would be screening.
The applicant for the ones on Royal Oak said that they would put in screening.
They offered to do that. Yeah, they sure did.
It is not a mandated thing from the city's perspective
If you look at
for
the-
rezoning.
If you look at the zone, I thought it said screening was required.
If
I'm
a
just-
site
just-
plan,
That'd be something to answer later, but as I say, I believe that is in the zone, that screening is required.
But not if you don't.
But I'm saying.
We
it's
have
in the
some
zip-
more information.
Yeah, get more information, thank you.
And the one comment about reaching out to the property south of there.
We've tried phone calls, emails, and again, the property's in poor condition. The tenant that's using it right now, as you know, doesn't really take care of the location, but there's a group in Franklin that owns it, but we have had 0 response.
What
We
do you
tried-
mean he doesn't take care of his location?
The
He doesn't
location
take care
south
of it.
of us is in very poor shape.
You talking
You
about right
mean
next door to the left of
Grass
you?
and
or-
stuff?
No, just the property
Next
Yeah.
to
south.
Directly planned south of the
Next to their
Hatch
nursing home.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's rental property, I'm like you. I
No,
think it
you're
is.
100% correct.
Is there a structure on it?
Yeah.
Yes, it's
I don't remember
it's
seeing one.
almost,
It's a small brick
Yeah,
house,
there
but
is.
it has
There is.
access to Columbia Avenue.
it's
Okay.
it's almost got an
and that's
apartment off
the
to the
interesting
side.
part.
Yes,
That's right. Good
it has
point. Good
access to
point.
Columbia Avenue, so I can see
We'll work on that.
the correlation
We
there.
move on, because we're gonna have some more opportunity to discuss
Go off.
this.
Well, may I say too, it might be, I mean, because obviously you bought this property thinking that you were gonna do, it was zoned for future use.
Oh,
as
yeah,
in
per
envision.
Envision Franklin.
So it was never done to be intentionally, but we've got to be really careful as we have this future zoning where it impedes on existing neighborhoods.
Well, and just as
We're
a-
doing, this is the third one of these rezoning requests we've had in the last few months. And so I think it's gonna become more prevalent, and I think we've gotta try to start getting ahead of it and seeing where these places are and how it affects the existing neighborhood.
May I say one other thing? Just because it is in a land use plan, which is what Envision Franklin is, does not mean that rezoning is automatic, because that is a Board of Mayor and Alderman decision.
Thank you.
No, and I agree.
No,
It was
not-
automatic, it wouldn't be coming to us.
Well,
And
that's
just
right, exactly, exactly.
As an FYI, the backup plan for this one, for another offer that was in, was to parcel that and go up with 2 large residents. So it was
Sure.
taken away from the character, and like we did with 1104 West Main, we just wanted to preserve that character of the road and keep everything intact. So, like I said, we're gonna paint the existing structure, make some minor modifications to porch, and that's about it.
Okay, we're ready to move on. Item 12 is ordinance 20, thank you. Item is ordinance 2017-23 to be entitled ordinance to amend chapters 2 and 3 and 8 of the zoning ordinance of the city of Franklin, Tennessee to allow limited development in the flood fringe overlay district, FFO, within certain central Franklin character area overlay districts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last month, the Planning Commission adopted a plan amendment to Envision Franklin for the downtown riverfront area along East Main and First Avenue. And it included both trails along Harpeth River and creating a developable area along the edges of the FFO, along East Main and First Avenue. And that's kind of in response to a few properties that have lost their non-conforming use status because they're in the floodplain, allowing them to have non-residential uses once again and allow some redevelopment in that area. So the Planning Commission adopted that plan, and this text amendment before you tonight is what implements that plan. So it is the zoning tool that allows that to happen. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Alderman Peterson?
This did come before the Planning Commission, and I believe it was also part of the our joint conceptual workshop here. However, in looking at some of this, there are a number of questions that make this different from some of the other things that we have looked at. First of all, it specifically gives authority not to the actual flood elevation in this area, which is the elevation of the 100-year flood is 639 feet. It specifically refers to using 630 feet. And I realize that not all of this is on the 630 feet, but there's certainly part of it. And I have a concern about that. I also have a concern that they refer to the 10-year floodplain. And at this point, I've been unable to get a map for what the 10-year floodplain would be, and I have some other problems with that because 10-year floodplain means that there's a 10% chance that it could flood in any year, as opposed to a 1% chance for the 100-year flood that we have. Another aspect of this, and actually I'm just hitting the high points of some of my concerns. It also says, as a part of this amendment to the zoning ordinance, that a public multi-use path shall be located along the Harpeth River with pedestrian access. I haven't consulted with the legal department, but I think shall and will mean totally two different things legally. And so I would like to get further information about that, because it sounds like we are committing and maybe even committing to build a multi-use path there. And that certainly may happen eventually, but as it's stated in here, it sounds like that it would be a done deal if we pass this thing. And there are some other parts of it, and this is probably my another great concern that I think that needs to be. Well, there are two pieces to this. One of them, it says that this provides additional development rights along with certain development limits without requiring compensatory cut and fill. And that is different from much of what we do in other areas similar to this. And the last thing is that there's some places in here that say, in cases of conflict between this subdivision and section 3.4.5, the floodway fringe overlay district. And by the way, if you look at that, it also refers to the 3.4.5 floodway fringe overlay district also refers to the chapter 5, which is a development chapter in the zoning ordinance, but it also talks about development in the floodplain, and it says, this right here is saying, if in case of conflict between this subsection, the regulations of this subsection shall apply. And in chapter 5, on the flood part, it says, in cases of conflict, the chapter 5 part will apply. And so there are just a lot of things, and I would really, I mean, since we've had such a time on that, could we put this back on the, on our work session for next time? Because as I have already met a couple of times.
It's not on the voting tonight.
No, it's not, but I'm
So,
just saying,
yeah,
I'm asking
We're
to
glad to
have
put
it
it back on if that's,
on the work session.
is that,
Another work session or a joint conceptual workshop?
No, another work session, because let me tell you, when it's a joint conceptual workshop, we do not have that recorded, and I would love to have had the recording of what we had. We need to think about putting the joint conceptual workshop being recorded again. It's just an aside from this much. But as I say, no, I'd like to see it on a work session, because I've already met with 2 different groups on this, and I still have many questions and unable at this point, and part of it may be just because I don't understand it, but I mean, it just doesn't, there are too many things there that are.
well, you've heard the
Different.
concerns, and we'll put it on another workshop.
Thank you,
and bring
thank
it
you, I
back.
appreciate that.
We'll move on and consider items 13 and 14 together, which have to do with municipal solid waste transport services, and 14, which has to do with bids for solid waste sanitary landfill disposal services.
We talked about this 2 weeks ago, and in a more general sense, we've done a more thorough, been able to complete more of our evaluation of the bids received. And as the mayor referenced, item 13 deals with the hauling, essentially, of the solid waste. And we would like to, and then there was only one bidder for that. The item 14 deals with the actual landfill services. And so that had multiple bidders in that case, one of which took no exceptions, 2 of which took multiple exceptions. With all that in consideration, I guess summary, high-level recommendation would be to defer the award for the hauling component, the transportation component, till your first meeting in October, just to keep that alive. There may be an option that could come in handy in terms of how we may work with our existing landfill services at Bi-County. Don't know that will produce anything, but we have the bid is good, I think, through the end of the year. Item 14, which deals with the actual landfill services, our recommendation is to reject all bids. The one that took no exceptions was the highest cost option. The other 2 took numerous exceptions, and it's difficult to say how those exceptions would affect the pricing if the other competitor had taken them, or the other competitors had the advantage of sort of tailoring the bid in that way. It just isn't clean in a way that we feel that we could move forward with that and be confident that it's going to meet our needs and be something that will work for 30 years, which is the idea that we're looking at, because we still have 9 years on our existing arrangement with Bi-County, which includes hauling and landfill services. So we're not in a rush, but we did want to see what the market might provide us, especially if we looked at a 30-year outlook. So that's how we would look at these, and what we would recommend you do tonight as we move forward. Keeps the one bid alive for us to continue to look at that, and the other, we reject bids, and we may want to consider somewhere out in the future going back out and looking at that again, but would not go ahead and make an award at this time. Let's go ahead and reject those bids.
Item 13 would be the motion tonight to delay until October the 10th.
That would be what we would recommend.
Okay. Any questions?
I just want to say, whenever we're depending on somebody else to help us with a project like this, I don't think we ever should drag our feet, because we never know what's going to happen. They might go bankrupt, close their doors too.
Just like the other
So,
side.
you know, I just think we need to, it's okay to wait till October, but keep it in mind and doesn't purposely drag our feet just because we've got 9 more years.
No, well, in recommending rejecting all bids, I actually did want to do a quick clarification. The bid that did not have any exceptions was actually the low bid, but when considering the transportation
Yes,
to that
yes,
landfill,
yes, yes.
it
That
was
that
above
made
the
the
other. So I
difference,
just
yeah.
want to make that clarification
Yeah.
for the
And I'm
vendor.
not saying
So-
we ought to accept
you.
it.
Right, so, but yeah, so we
The total cost.
we want to work through this as quickly as we can, but we wanted to make sure we explore the other avenues and bring back something that we feel comfortable recommending to you all.
Thank you.
Okay, on item 15, consideration resolution 2017-52, a resolution authorizing and providing for the financing and construction of a wastewater facilities project, including authorizing the execution of applications, contractual agreements. This is the additional $20 million that we're going to get from the state revolving loan fund. Is that what this is?
Yeah, this additional
Yeah,
20 takes
yeah.
us from 80 to 100 million. They also have agreed, because of where we are in the process, to lower the interest rate
Right.
for all 100 million
Right,
to
right.
1.47 million over 30 years, 1.47% over 30
Yeah,
years.
yeah, yeah.
Which is
Please.
a great benefit to us.
That's right.
Huge.
That should give everybody a happy face.
Yeah, that's right.
16 is professional services.
Exactly, you're right.
Well, 1.47 versus 3.2 should give you a happy face. How's that? 16 is a professional services agreement with Volkert for $71,500 for final design of the Franklin ITS extension project. Any questions on that one? Item 17 is continued discussion regarding Columbia Avenue improvements, project design alternatives, and consideration of Resolution 2017-43 to select the corridor design concept for the Columbia Avenue widening and improvements project.
We put this back on just to continue the discussion a little bit. We hit you with a lot of information last meeting. Wanted to provide a little follow-up, see what direction you had. There had been some discussion about even a special work session dedicated to this project, which we're glad to explore with you, but we didn't want to go to August till we talked about it again. One of the things I would ask for any direction you have in terms of the options. Right now, it appears that we're really talking primarily about the 5-lane, and I heard a good amount of support for some variation of the 5-lane design, but there is some interest in the roundabout too. I want to gauge, I guess, how much interest there is amongst the board as a whole before we spend a lot of time and effort evaluating one option over another. But we're open to your guidance on it. I just want to get a sense of where you want to be. If we have a special work session, or if we bring this back as part of our regular schedule, or if you want us to go ahead and delve into further design concepts in one path or the other. I think that's, if we have the time to get there tonight, that'd be great. I don't know if we do, but I wanted to keep us moving, and Paul and Jonathan may have some specifics they want to touch on as well, but that's what my hope had been for tonight's discussion.
I'll start.
Go.
5-lane or nothing at all, and do it at night.
Alderman Berger.
Paul and Jonathan, you gave us some great information last time, but I don't think we still have all the information we need to make a really good decision that is going to be effective years from now. Because frankly, I'm not interested in putting in a concrete jungle over there and having the same thing that we have on 96 East right now. That is impossible for anyone to cross that road. It's so difficult for anyone to come out and take left-hand turns. We have high accident rates over there. So why would we want to take that kind of thing and duplicate it across town and think that that's going to be effective 20 years from now? And also, it is a proven fact that businesses struggle on roads like that. They do struggle. They struggle to keep, we have businesses going in and out all the time on 96. And it's very difficult for businesses to stay when you have, well, the way Columbia is shaped, or the way the businesses are there now is quite different than 96 as well, because sometimes 96 you can turn into a shopping area, and then you have the ability to come and go through a shopping area, but we don't have a lot of that on 96, on Columbia Avenue until you get over to the Kroger Shopping Center, the Target Shopping Center. But if you look at that and all the different problems that we have there, I don't think it's a wise decision to take and put another 5-lane of concrete on a road that is going to be very difficult for businesses to survive in the future on. If you do any kind of reading on that kind of thing, that's one of the first things they will tell you is the viability long-term of businesses on different roads such as 5 lanes. So that is a red flag to me. I don't think that's being, for me, not being responsible to the people for the future of who will be living and working and being on Columbia Avenue for their livelihood. Now, the roundabouts will affect some businesses, absolutely. I think you showed us the last time there was 1 or 2 that now we're going to be affected that are not going to be affected. I think the Columbia Avenue at Matt Hatcher with the light and the other bookend and at Downs with the light is a good thing. And then in between, if we were able to do the roundabouts, would be all the things you've addressed, the safety issues, the moving of traffic, getting in and out and accessing the businesses. To me, all those items and all those points that you brought up are very sensible and reasonable, and I think we need to look at those. The other thing is the roundabouts are 2 lanes with an apron, so you can accommodate your large semi-trucks. So that's one of the worries. I talked to a business owner over there, and he said, you're never going to get trucks around those roundabouts. Well, sir, if you design them to be 1 lane, or you design them to be where trucks can't get around, you're correct. But if you design them correctly with 2 lanes, where a truck is supposed to use the 2 lanes and possibly use the apron if they need it, then there shouldn't be a problem. So I also still want a perspective on that. I think we need to have that. I'm a very visual person. I think people on this board, I don't know how adept everybody is to reading plans all the time, but honestly, this is a huge decision. Still want a perspective. I want to see what that looks like. And right now, I would have to lean, I don't like the options. The roundabout, to me, the options with the 2 lights at both ends seem reasonable, practical, responsible, long-term to the residents that are going to live here, and the residents that live here now, and the residents to come 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now. And I think this is such a huge decision that we need to continue this discussion. We need to delve into more information, and I want your professional opinion.
Without delving too deep into, we actually had that in the presentation tonight. So what we've done since last time and why it took so long to get the information uploaded, we've actually gone back and revised the 5-lane section and the roundabout section. So what we were going to show tonight was the revised analysis of the roundabouts with the signal at both ends. And we've also revised the 5-lane section to help with safety. So we put some access, we've actually done a lot of access management along that corridor to help with the safety factor. So that's actually what we have in the presentation tonight.
And so when do we get to see that?
The intent was tonight.
All right.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Between the options, what are the resulting levels of service?
We haven't calculated the level of service. We've shown what the travel times would be.
Yeah, most of this analysis that we've done is making the assumption that Mac Hatcher is going to be fully built at some point.
Okay.
There's going to become a period where Mac Hatcher is not built, and those vehicles per day, instead of the 25,000 projected, will quickly go up to about 30,000 vehicles per day.
Sure.
So you will have more than likely during peak hours a significant number of these intersections at a failure level at some point in the future.
Doesn't it make sense that we should at least compare them that way, with and without Mac Hatcher? And don't we have some financing constraints if the levels of service fall below a D?
The reason we show the numbers that we,
We have problems all over
the
the
reason we
city.
show the numbers that we do is in the past, we've had difficulty, or some folks have had difficulty comparing what, what a
Okay,
level
let
service
me,
is.
let me translate.
So yes, we can do that.
If you're putting proposals in front of me that I have to pick from, as a crass politician, I would rather not be asked why I voted for something that resulted in level of service F.
So what we did was we gave
If-
We gave you time, travel time.
I get it, but
Okay.
if another measure that we use is the traditional A through F, elementary school grading scale, then just tell me what the level of service is measured that way. And if I choose to pick a D or a C or an F, then I'll know. But I
We
don't,
can absolutely
I don't want to
provide that.
pick it based upon travel
There you
time.
go, there's another thing to
If
do.
another measure
Hmm?
is, a D or an F. If I'm going to pick a D, I want to at least know I'm picking a D.
Yeah, we can look at that and provide that information.
Okay.
I have just a question, because some of the things that were provided for us was the average daily traffic for the last 10 years. It's hardly changed on Columbia Avenue in the last 10 years.
It's small changes. What you've actually seen is a little bit of a drop since 65 was
Exactly.
completed.
That's right.
Well, you've got
Are we-
factories that have closed on Columbia Avenue.
And a lot
That's
of,
true, that's true.
a lot of the projections too depends on how fast the west side of the city develops out, especially that southwestern portion of the city. That'll have a big influence on it.
Well, that's true whether we do nothing.
Yes.
I mean, if we do nothing and more people move over on that side of town, it gets worse. That's a constant, in my view, that's a constant.
Yeah.
But what we can know is how many cars are going up and down the road today, and what 5 lanes or roundabouts with lights, or, you guys should be able to tell us what,
Yeah, we can.
not just what the travel time is, but also, we use level of service for a reason, right?
Yeah, we can get you.
And
I didn't
we-
make that up.
We can. What we've tried to do is show you based on, we're actually showing the same data that goes into making that. We've just tried to simplify it and show you the individual
People tend to
pieces that go
understand
into
travel
making
times
that.
Okay, well,
better than
nothing
grades,
simpler,
actually.
here's what I know. If
Yeah.
my kids come home with A's and B's, I'm good. And if they come home with D's, we have a problem.
I wanna
But if
know.
they come home 5 minutes late, you have a
Yeah,
problem.
there you go.
I never got bent, I never got bent out of shape about 5 minutes, honestly.
Okay, 25 minutes.
Let me ask you one
30,
question.
how about
Do you want
30?
them to go through this presentation, which has been refined from what they had
No, I
last
want them
time?
to, yes.
Tonight,
long is your
right
presentation?
now?
How long is your presentation?
Okay, well, let's do it.
First one?
Okay.
There are three,
Paul,
there are
Paul's
3 of them on
presentation.
here.
And maybe we'll get the
20
presentation
20
and.
She's got it
The
up
first
already.
one is
It's
the
the second
PowerPoint,
one,
the second one is the
attachment.
PDF, so go to the
I
second
don't
one.
wanna rush this.
Second one. No, we can
We
get
wanna
through
sit
it.
here
We're
for a
gonna
while,
come
fine.
back and we're gonna hammer it out some more.
A lot of this presentation is redundant, and it's redundant on purpose to show you the information that we've presented in the past, but then also with the revised concept. And just as a refresher, because not everybody was here at the last meeting, was we presented the roundabout concept with the change of adding signalized intersections at Downs Boulevard and Mac Hatcher to gate the corridor. And then the 5-lane section is almost a hybrid. We basically have incorporated medians and access management into it to where we felt that we could reasonably do that without having major impacts on business owners to try to improve the safety and improve the travel times, which was our goal with that. And so we'll walk you through now the analysis, and we also went parcel by parcel and kind of drove the corridor last time. So now we'll walk through the information that really hopefully can help drive a decision in addition to the level of service that we'll get. And so again, this is for those watching at home, this is the project, Mac Hatcher to Downs Boulevard. You can see the overall regional significance of the project. And these are the existing today, 2016, traffic volumes. You got your daily traffic and the time of day, your traffic comparison of percentage of cars and trucks, and then also the number of local versus through trip. We've been through all this before, so I'm going to continue to push forward.
And one of the things, though, is this truck peak is much more, it's bigger than other similar roads, right?
That is correct. It's higher than what you would see typically across the state on these type of
Thank you.
facilities. These are your average travel times today with no traffic, engineering calculation based off speed, distance.
That's a hypothetical number.
Yes. The
Okay.
three, yeah, if there's no traffic, it's
'Cause
3
there's
minutes,
never
10
no
seconds.
traffic.
Average day, 5 minutes and 10 seconds based on the analysis that we did. Longest recorded based on the analysis we did was 10 minutes and 20 seconds today. It doesn't mean that's the longest ever, it's just that's,
Yeah.
during the data collection time period, that's what it was. These were the future traffic projection growths. Again, this is the 2041 volume of 25,400 vehicles per day, assumes a full Mac Hatcher build-out. If Mac Hatcher is not built out and we continue to approve a significant amount of development on the west side of Franklin, I fully anticipate that number to be higher than 25,000 vehicles per day. And so we really dove into 3 areas: operation, safety, and physical impact, to try to give you the information to make a decision. And so we've since presented these 3 concepts as what we originally started off with. I think we've eliminated the 5-lane median divided concept, so we put a big X through it. And we're really focusing on the 5-lane section in the roundabout concept. And again, this was the original data that was presented, so this has already been presented. We've since gone back and modified the data, since we've added access management and medians to some degree into the 5-lane section. We've modified the roundabout section to put signalized intersections at Mac Hatcher and Downs Boulevard. The revised information is here. And so with this, you add the access management on, you see a slight improvement with the travel time for the 5-lane, and you see it gets a little bit worse for the revised roundabout concept. Moving into operations, this is again, the original data that was presented. And with the revised concepts that we presented last time, you can see with the 5-lane concept, it has dropped now from 530 seconds worth of delay to 375 seconds of delay, overall delay.
And those 2 slides, that's really important, if Paul can kind of jump back and forth. If you notice, the original 5-lane was 530 seconds of total delay, and you jump to the next slide, again, 375. The reason that dropped is because of the access management we added in there. So there's less vehicles entering and leaving the roadway. And this is the data, to go back to your point with level of service, this is the exact data that's used to calculate that. We've just tried to give you the data versus the letters. So it's pretty easy to convert that for us.
The roundabout concept originally was 215 seconds worth of delay. Since we've removed the roundabout at Downs Boulevard, the delay has actually increased a little bit, 240 seconds of overall delay. And so we're kind of going towards the middle there. Looking at safety, this was the original safety analysis. Again, today this is existing conditions. The collisions on Columbia Avenue today are almost 3 times the statewide average. That is concerning to me as an engineer, and so we definitely try to take that into consideration as we look to redesign that road or improve that roadway to bring that down. We really strive to have that below or at the state average at all locations throughout the city. We also looked at the fatality and injury collision rate. Again, that's about double what you see across the state. So safety, again, is a big, important factor as far as we're concerned as we try to design this roadway, regardless of the concept selected.
And those averages that we got from the state are directly from TDOT, as the note says, but it's classified not as an exact roadway comparable to Columbia Avenue. It's an urban roadway. It's a 2 or 3 lane with turn lanes as a state route. So that's how TDOT classifies those overall datas throughout the state.
So again, we looked at conflict points, and conflict points really drive the safety of that roadway long term. And on an arterial roadway, you're always trying to limit access or have it at strategic points to where you're limiting those conflict points and managing them better to reduce the potential accidents that may occur on that corridor. So originally the 5-lane signalized concept had 583 conflict points. The roundabout concept had 243 conflict points. Again, trying to implement access management on the 5-lane section, we were able to reduce it from 583 conflict points down to 385. That's where access management is big and can help with that overall corridor performance. The conflict points with the roundabout went from 243 up to 258, mainly because we got rid of the roundabout at Downs Boulevard, so the number of conflict points has now increased slightly there.
So let me make sure I understand what conflict point means. That's like curb cut access to a business.
That's correct.
That is correct.
Okay. So you got 200 of them out of the 5-lane plan.
That's correct.
Yes, that is
Okay.
correct.
So somewhere there's a rendering of the new parking lot arrangements and the new in and out at Oscars.
We don't have the parking lot arrangements. That's something we would do in design, but we do have the rough locations of where we would propose the entrances to be.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, right. And have we posted that on our website?
We have not, we did present it at the last BOMA meeting, so it has been on the agendas.
We did show that at the public meeting though, too. We had a.
The new
Not the new
deconflicted
ones,
one?
no, we didn't have these.
No, not the new ones.
The
but
old
We
ones.
did show the conflict management on the 5-lane, which
Look,
closer, pretty close.
it does not matter which one we pick. There are going to be dozens of outraged stakeholders, okay? I, for one, know that we're going to have to pick between two choices that make, and either one makes a lot of people mad, okay? I just want the people in the room that get mad to be right about why they're mad. So if we could, starting now, push this information out so that the people can get on the right side of their issue, like landowner A doesn't like the resulting in and out for his or her business, and landowner B now goes, oh, that looks awesome. Whereas they thought they were the opposite way around when they were here last and it was on the wall. I just want the people with the torches and the pitchforks to know which side they ought to be on.
Yeah,
And-
that's where we need a special meeting, because we've done so many other meetings leading up to it, and now we're switching the game plan from what was known to be the options.
Well, I think in the big picture,
In its entirety.
the roundabout still puts a whammy on the same people. And the 5-lane conceptually is more appealing to many, okay? But that 5-lane option may lose some supporters when 200 different conflict points went away. Those people may suddenly say, I hate them both, or now I'm a roundabout person, okay? So, this is going to be a controversial decision, period. And it's going to be a high-profile decision. And we're gonna have to make it. I just want the people that come in here at public hearings and at other meetings to know how their particular situation is being treated under the options. Because I don't wanna have a 3-hour meeting with people coming up with speaker cards and we say to them, no, you're good, you gotta write in, write out. And they're like, oh, well, if I'd have known that, I wouldn't have come. I just don't wanna have that meeting. So if we could start to push this out affirmatively, that'd be good.
I mean, if you're comfortable with, what we've taken with both options is we've taken sort of the downside of each of them and tried to lessen it.
I
Okay?
get it.
So if you're comfortable with us pushing that out.
But 200 conflict, look, 200 fewer conflict spots is a superior traffic solution.
Right.
It makes probably 200 people that much madder.
I agree, we do definitely need to try to push this back out to the residents to make sure they understand it, or the business
Not
owners to
try,
make
we
sure
have
they
to.
understand it. But what we did, I want to make sure that I explain this, because we explained it at the last meeting, was we took a very common sense approach to the access. If they had 2 or 3 access points, and we felt that 2 or 3 access points on the arterial road was not needed, we would simply remove one and convert one to a right-in, right-out, leaving them a primary one. Or if they could reasonably be serviced off the side street, we move them to the side street. And so,
Reason is in the eye of the beholder.
True.
In these instances, okay? We had a reasonable sign ordinance, and Mr. Alexander hated it, okay? And so, just, I'm telling you where this is headed,
Yep.
okay?
We got it.
And we cannot be wrong by disseminating the information. No matter what we do, it's gonna be like a bad wedding. There's gonna be half the room hates what we do. But they might as well at least know which side to sit on.
yeah, I agree. I wanted you to understand the removing of the 200 conflict
Okay, I get
points,
it.
so.
I don't question for 1 minute the value judgments and the engineering solutions that are being pitched. But eventually, you're gonna punt this thing into our lap, and we're gonna have to make a political decision.
And we've got a project webpage that we will put this on, but it has been on the last agenda and on this agenda, so it is publicly available now.
But we'll do
we'll
some
get it
extra.
These
Absolutely.
the deconflicted drawings are up?
Yes, they were up the last meeting.
I thought I was just told they weren't.
No, they're in there. I put them in there.
Okay,
I downloaded them and reorganized, and they're in there.
okay.
If we could go ahead and finish the presentation, and then we're gonna have another session where we'll hammer on it some more, but I think you make some great points, Alderman McClendon, to make sure that we're disseminating this information so people have a thorough understanding of what we're talking about. So go ahead.
So this was what was originally presented as far as safety. It just really shows the percentage increase or decrease of traffic collisions given the proposed options. This is a revised, so the 5-lane concept, what you see, we've been able to bring it down from 41% or from 41% down to 26%, and the roundabout went from 25% decrease to 10% decrease. At the intersections, 1% and 26% at those intersections. The physical impact, that has not changed at all, other than we've eliminated the 4-lane fully median divided concept. Again, the physical impacts has not changed. This was the original data summary that we had provided you, and so since we've removed the 4-lane median divided concept, we've narrowed it down really to two options. What we put in yellow was really not a big difference between the two options, and the red and green just really highlights one is significantly better than the other option from an engineering standpoint. And so that's really the end of it. I know that's a lot of information, and like I said, we will get with the business owners to make sure we push this information out to them and look for your guidance on how to proceed.
And how do you plan to do that with the business owners? Is this one-on-one, or are we going to call them in for a meeting? Or how do you do that?
We've spent we've spent a lot of time and effort meeting one-on-one. We probably utilize a project website, and we're open to any guidance. We'll push it out through social media, and we'd be open to meeting with them one-on-one at this point if they're interested in doing that. But
And generally, we've had a lot of one-on-one meetings already. Generally, what we hear, and it's not surprising one bit, is don't do anything that negatively impacts me. That's kind of what we got out of those meetings, really. Other than that, that's what we get.
Yeah, well, I think we all
Okay.
agree that's not an option.
So we'll figure out a time to have a special work session, early August, and,
Yeah, I'd suggest probably either August 1st or August 15th, maybe, the off Tuesday maybe is an option. If you,
yeah, we'll
look at with
circulate
you.
that.
But
and-
we'll want to get this out, let people digest it, and then do that as a dedicated work session and invite people to participate.
And
That'd be
so
great.
we'll be back in 15 minutes. Is that plenty of time?
One thing I'd like to see.
We do have
again,
an executive session.
The red and yellow on
That's right,
where it would
that's right.
affect property owners.
That's in your packet, your revised packet as well.
Okay, can we go over that again?
Yes.